We got sound? Yes. Okay, we got sound. Thank you very much for coming again today. So just a couple of housekeeping rules to get started. If you can please turn your mobile phones to silent. You can access the conference Wi-Fi. Your conference Wi-Fi details are on the back of your card. There's no smoking in the building. Toilets there are a couple of sets of toilets. One set are in the green room behind me. And then if you go down the corridor and to the left, there are accessible toilets as well. Morning and afternoon tea are going to be in the green room. Lunch will be on Dot Strong Terrace, which is up on level 3. What else is there? No hot drinks, so please don't bring any hot drinks into the room. Bottled water or water in cups is okay, cold water. No food, no glass containers here in the Eugene Goosens Hall either. If they're in the unlikely event of an emergency, we've got a few emergency exits. One of them is to the left or to your right of the stage, also behind you up the stairs. If there is, if there's an orange signal, it's just a warning, don't worry about it. In that unlikely event of an emergency, we will have people to assist us. There is a grouping area, whatever they call it, up towards the Powerhouse Museum on Harris Street. That's about all I can think of, so I'm going to hand over to Liddy.
Thank you, Jerry. You get a B+ for getting most of that out. Sorry we're late, but it has been fun being in Sydney and having the train problems and so on. Tomorrow we will try and start absolutely on time because we have a tight schedule, but today we've had all sorts of problems. Just in opening the day, I'd like to draw attention to our sponsors because our sponsors make our conference possible. And you can see that we have the people that we really rely on. It's fantastic, isn't it? Microsoft obviously here, Vision Australia as always, Accessibility Oz, QA Info Tech. That's interesting. When people come from India to our conference, we're very pleased to welcome them. We have streaming, which means you can all rewatch things, and if you missed yesterday's events, I suggest you do. Otherwise, tell your colleagues to watch what happens for the whole 3. And Red Bee are doing the captions. So we are really grateful to our sponsors for making it possible, and particularly to the ABC. This is a fabulous venue, and we're really spoilt to be in it, not just watching it on television. So tomorrow we're going to have more talks. We're going to have the OZeWAI AGM. OZeWAI is a funny organisation because we seem to just do things. We don't have many formal things going on. We have a committee that just does stuff. If you'd like to join the committee, please so-called nominate tomorrow at the AGM or tell someone to. I think we're going to have the AGM online for those people who are not actually here wanting to participate. And then in the afternoon we're going to have a workshop having a look at what, as a community of experts, we can contribute to the work that actually ends up being what we practice. Yesterday I made the point that I think this is a professional association where we do dirty talk. We talk about how do you get accessibility to work and how do you help people understand the need for accessibility and those things. And sometimes in this environment we say, and that doesn't work, don't do that, try this one. There are lots of other events happening now, which I'm very pleased to see, where people are reaching out to the community and explaining the need to think about accessibility and the benefits. And those, I think, are quite different events. And I'm absolutely thrilled to see that we are at last seeing what we can almost call an industry of accessibility. That's the only way we're going to make a real difference. And I hope you guys all help grow it incredibly. So today it's my pleasure to say thank you to Microsoft again and to say please come and tell us about the good things that happen because we're really always interested. It's pretty important to our lives. David's going to start, I think, and then Annie will follow on. So welcome, David. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Before we kick off, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. Just let me... tonight, I should say. It's the morning. Not quite there yet. How we go? There we go. There we go. I got a Mac to work. Awesome. So as I said, we're doing something a little bit different this morning. So normally, I've spoken the last couple of conferences, and normally I give an update of the things that have been happening in the accessibility world inside of Microsoft. So I'm going to give you a little bit of update on where we're going, really from a cultural perspective, and really focus on how we're driving accessibility and inclusion into our culture, and really embedding that as just our natural course of business. But I'm then going to hand over to Annie Parker, who heads up our global startup operation, who's going to talk about how we're starting to embed that into our startup ecosystem. And then living that, Pete Horsley, who runs the Remarkable Accelerator, is going to talk about the work that Remarkable does to stimulate the startup community, the emerging startup community in Australia around disability. And we're going to hear from two of the startups that have been through the Remarkable program, Ability Made and Exceptional. So Aaron from Exceptional and Mel from Ability Made, and they're going to do a quick pitch. So, talking about culture and talking about accessibility, really we're thinking about how do we make this sustainable. So we've had a lot of activity over the last 3 years, and we've made some progress. The worst thing that we could do is stop and just say, look, okay, we've done some great work. That's great. Let's put tools down and pat ourselves in the back, because we really missed the point. So really, we're focusing on trying to embed accessibility into our culture and diversity and inclusion as part of our core business. And that stems from how we are as an organisation, so our organisational culture, the products that we build, so ensuring that inclusion is a core component of everything that we do, and really thinking about the future and what's the innovation, what can we drive, how much further can we go, and really stimulating that hacking culture, which has been so important to us and so successful. And really the key thing about embedding that culture is that you really have to represent the community that you're looking to serve. And by hiring people with disabilities, and on the screen there are 18 different people who work for Microsoft, who are all people with disabilities. And it's really important to have those people inside your organisation, because they're the first check and balance. They ensure that we're thinking, they bring that diversity of thought to the table. And it's really quite crucial. And so we've been driving a lot of our inclusive hiring programs, autism hiring, but more broadly, we're also looking to ensure that we've got diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, and diversity of perspective inside of Microsoft. And that really is coming from the top down. Last month was National Disability Employment Awareness Month in the US, and our CEO did a series of 6 videos focusing on a series of innovations that Microsoft had developed over the last couple of years, either talking to the developer that had designed it or come up with the idea, or people that were benefiting from it inside of Microsoft. So looking at how we're driving inclusive presentations inside of PowerPoint, so using PowerPoint Translator and automatic alt text and other things that we've embedded into PowerPoint, learning tools, which sits within OneNote, but we're extending that now to Edge and to Word as well, so that people with children with learning difficulties, but people with learning difficulties can also decode text in those applications, break it out by syllables and nouns and verbs, and understand the grammatical structure and have it read to them, and a whole range of really cool stuff that you can do with it. iDrive, which is now embedded into Windows, so we now have a separate separate user interface. Once you plug in an eye tracking piece of technology, so a Tobii eye gaze or something similar, that additional UI will kick in to make it easier for someone who can only move their eyes to operate and interface with Windows. Seeing AI, which I think I spoke about last year, which is a great application for free on the iPhone that helps to read short text, read documents, take pictures, have that described to someone who is blind or has low vision. Soundscape, which we launched in Australia a couple of months ago. Soundscape allows a person to get audio cues to navigate a space outdoors using GPS, but it also has the ability to interface with Bluetooth beacons as well, and so we're rolling that out. We've seen good uptake of that technology inside of Australia, and again, it's a free iOS application, so if you have an iPhone, get out there and download and play with it. And then finally, the adaptive controller. So actually, we've just launched our holiday season advertising in the US. and it features the adaptive controller, and that allows anyone who has a range of mobility impairments to plug in all sorts of different switches and devices into the controller, and then have that mapped so they can play the game. So if you can suck something, bite it, bash it, hit it, you can play games, which is really, really cool. And really that's coming from that inclusive design principle. So it's really thinking about the interaction challenges that we see for people with disabilities, and really focusing on that interaction challenge and allowing our engineers to solve that and figure out how we can scale that out and really take that from being a solution for one and scaling that to be a solution for many. And really they're the core three principles of our inclusive design approach, which is recognising exclusion, so acknowledging it, identifying it, learning from that diversity, and then solving that interaction challenge, or solving that challenge for that one person, scaling that to many. And we're driving that into our hacking culture. And so I think I've talked about the 1 week hack in the past, which is something that our CEO Satya brought in about almost 5 years ago. And we've seen this incredible growth in the number of ability hacks, which is where people designate that their hack is going to be focused on accessibility or a disability outcome. And some of the amazing things that have come out of that include the adaptive controller, include learning tools, include eye gaze. So really stimulating that innovation inside the company to really think about what we can do to go further, which has been fantastic. And really the next wave is artificial intelligence. And I think AI really presents an unprecedented opportunity to enable us to amplify human ingenuity and to amplify human abilities, or to augment human abilities where possible. And so we can start to make assistive technology smarter, more useful, more usable, more situationally aware. And so we want to stimulate, not just inside of Microsoft to think about how to do that, but stimulate the community to think about how to build using that. And if you think about what AI does in terms of its ability to understand location, to be contextually aware, to be able to translate visual information into text or speech, to be multilingual, to be conversational, to understand natural and more sort of natural language conversations. Simple language, for example, is a really big opportunity for AI that we see for people with cognitive disabilities. Sentiment, so the ability to, at least in the best way that AI can, understand the emotion or the sentiment of someone as you're conversing with them. And then also to be able to hear, so be able to take in audio information and make sense of that in a way that makes sense to the person interfacing with it. And that brings us to AI for Accessibility, which is this awesome program that we've launched, which is open for applications. It's a 5-year, $25 million program where we're trying to stimulate ideas, and we're really focusing on trying to stimulate thoughts around developing technology, building knowledge around how to use AI in those sort of applications, and then really looking to forge partnerships with disability organisations, with not-for-profits, with partners, and with startups. And there's 3 sort of challenge areas that we're sort of focused on, because they're kind of the areas where we've seen innovation starting to emerge, but where we think we can have the biggest impact. And so one is employment, which is sort of a bit of a no-brainer. We all know that the unemployment rates for people with disabilities is far higher than those without disabilities. But also underemployment and workforce participation is horrendous for people with disabilities, and we want to improve that situation. Daily life, so just living, doing. How do people, so gaming is a good example of that. We want to make gaming inclusive because that's an activity that we all like to do, and increasingly it's a social aspect of people's lives, and so we don't want to exclude people from that activity. And finally, communication connection, which sort of is part of all of that, but really allowing people to communicate in ways that make sense for them, to connect with others, and to use artificial intelligence to enable that to occur in more ways. So I know I've been really quick and I've run through that, but I really want to get to the sort of the cool stuff that Annie and Pete are going to talk to. So with that, while we're stimulating innovation out there in the ecosystem, I want to get Annie to come up and talk about how we work with the startup ecosystem globally. So Thank you. Over to you.
Can I go with the roving mics on? Excellent. Morning, everybody. How are we all? Let's do that again. Morning, everybody. Perfect. Listen, so I'm going to quickly run you through what we do with startups at Microsoft. I'll only spend sort of 3 or 4 minutes on that, and then we're genuinely going to go and get to some really cool stuff, which is to actually see some startups and meet some founders who are building really cool, interesting technical solutions for people with disability. And they're homegrown talent, Aussies doing awesome work here, and ideally, obviously, then taking that technology to the world to help as many people as possible. So I'm going to quickly run you through what we do at Microsoft and how we help startups. Basically, it's a series of different tracks of help. Any startup, particularly startups in the B2B and enterprise space, because that's our Microsoft heartland, what we do is we want to encourage you to build with us and partner with us. So we give you some free credits to build on our cloud platform, Azure, and use all of the services that come with that. We give you technical help and support. So we have both a track of sort of resources that you can use online, as well as a help desk that you can call whenever you've got a problem. And we also then help you go to market. So what I mean by that is helping you sell through Microsoft channels. Now, that one's an important one. Think about it. Any small company out there wants to be able to sell to hundreds, if not thousands of people, but they don't have a sales force to do that. We do. We also have an enormous partner network with which you can then sell through to be able to get your solution into as many people's hands as possible. That's really what we're doing. The whole startup program is to get you ready so that you can sell through our channels and to our partners, which is obviously super cool, because instead of then having to raise funding to get your business to grow, you can raise more customers and get a repeatable revenue stream instead. We also have a bunch of scale-up programs in 7 different countries globally. You can see them all listed there. And a scale-up program is where we actually take and hold the hands of those really, really high potential B2B companies that are scaling super fast, and we give them as much help and support as we can over a 3 or 4 month period to help them get there faster. I get asked this question a lot, which is, that all sounds wonderful, Annie, but that kind of feels like there might be a catch in there somewhere. Why is Microsoft doing this? Do you have ulterior motives? And the truth is, no, we don't. We genuinely want to be in this space because we know that we can help these companies grow faster with our help and partner with them. It helps us identify talent. So that could be talent in the form of a really cool piece of technology in China that we want to help launch in the US. It could be that a founder has decided that perhaps that idea isn't necessarily the one they want to work on anymore, and they might want to join Microsoft or join one of our customers and suppliers. Accessing talent, particularly in the ICT space right now, is pretty hot and pretty hard. So for us, this is a really great way of engaging with this ecosystem to be able to find out where those awesome, talented people are. Simply as well, it is about product adoption. If we get more of these startups building on Azure, that's just good for the future, because today's startups are tomorrow's partner network. Clearly, it is also just the right thing to do. Microsoft is an enormous organization with a huge amount of assets in terms of resources, talented people, engineers, wonderful marketing people, PR, lawyers, sales folk, and we just want to give that help to that ecosystem more broadly, because it is the right thing to do. And as I say, today's startups are tomorrow's big companies as well. In amongst this group of folks, you never know, the next Atlassian could be about to present to you, and in 10 years' time, when they go and list on the New York Stock Exchange, you guys can all say, I remember when I heard them pitch. And just before I hand over to Pete, and he's going to walk you through the Remarkable program, which I'm a huge fan of, just want to give you some examples of startups that I've met on my travels since I joined Microsoft a few months back. So Perespace, it's a really hard word to pronounce. Apparently it's much easier in Chinese. They've developed a really awesome piece of technology that plugs into the side of your standard Wi-Fi router at home. And what it does is it expands the capability of this Wi-Fi network to be able to understand human signatures. Like any radio wave, when a thing, a human or an individual passes through it, we actually have a unique signature. So it can understand that Annie has come home, or my dog has come home, and then it will actually set up the smart home for you based on what it knows about you. It's self-learning, so if you change your behavior, say in the summer you end up putting the air conditioning on, which you didn't in the winter, it will pick that up within 7 days. Self-learning. Super cool, and you're wondering how on earth this is related to accessibility, right? The coolest part of their technology is that it can detect when a person has fallen over within 15 seconds. Think about the application of how that technology might be able to enable an elderly person who lives by themselves to stay in their own home longer. Imagine it in care homes to be able to get to a person who's fallen over quickly with the help they need. The beautiful part about this as well is I actually met the founder in Shanghai a few months ago, and I said to him, how on earth did you come up with this idea and the application of it? And it turns out he was inspired to do it because his grandmother fell over. She lives by herself, and she was by herself on the floor for 36 hours before someone noticed and someone figured out that she wasn't answering her phone and answering the door. Inspiration can come from many different places for founders, but I personally believe when somebody has that genuine attachment, that genuine desire to solve the problem for the right reasons, these guys are going to do super awesome work globally. Curable, these folks have developed a piece of technology that sits, it's a little sticker box that sits on the larynx. Their artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms listen to the breath, and they strip out any extraneous noise and focus on certain things that are high indicators of specific respiratory illnesses. The first use case they have is on sleep apnea. So instead of having to go to a really horrible hospital and have leads coming out of you and a really awkward scenario of having to do a sleep test overnight in a very unfriendly and unwelcome environment, you can now do your sleep test at home. That product could perhaps go into lots of other respiratory disease recognition. And again, imagine the impact of what that might be for rural and remote communities, for being able to diagnose in the comfort of your own home as well. And then AirDoc, these guys have an AI camera that looks into the eye and the retina, and it can detect chronic diseases and catch them early so that they can be treated before they end up destroying someone's eyesight for good. Again, already in trials in regional China and being able to deliver extraordinary results with really, really high accuracy without the need for a doctor to even be present. Think about the application of that across other rural and remote communities in Africa and all over the world. So I get really excited when I meet founders who are not just solving a problem that can generate profit. I'm a firm believer that we can absolutely encourage and inspire founders to be for profit and for purpose at the same time. And I'm not the only one. Our CEO talks about this a lot, the power of how technology can do good, not just deliver profit, but to actually make a genuine difference in the world and for communities and for the planet. And it's really inspiring to meet founders when they give you that knowledge and that give you that energy to know that that's exactly what they are doing. And I mentioned the Remarkable program earlier. I've been a huge fan of these guys for the last 4 years, Pete? 3. All right. I've made you a little bit older, sorry. The Remarkable program is something that's been super close to my heart since they started. I've been involved as a mentor and something that I genuinely want to see not just growing here in Australia, but all across the world as well. I think the work they do is incredibly important and hugely inspiring. And now you're going to meet Pete, who's the founder, and then some of their startups.
Thanks, Annie. Thank you. Thanks, Annie, and thank you, David, as well. I think that Microsoft is an incredible organisation, and they're actually leading the world in lots of ways in accessibility, and it's exciting to watch their development as they go. So when we look at technologies like the ones that are on the screen behind me, we get excited about the application of these technologies that they could have in the space of disability and accessibility. We see those technologies. It's not hard to think about the ways that a self-driving car could impact the lives of people with mobility issues, for instance. But there is one problem with it, and I'm going to tell you about that in a second. Back in 2011, there was a study done in the US about the number of female car drivers who were injured in an accident, and they found that they were 47% more likely to be injured than their male counterparts. And they tried to work out what was going on when they looked at that, and they found that all of the crash test dummies were actually based on a male figure. When they started actually then looking at what a female person would look like in a car, they were able to reduce the number of car accidents or the severity of those car accidents. And so I think that there's an application for us in here around that. And that is that there is no normal, there is no average. We all have different body shapes, we all have different body types. And we're starting to now see design that actually includes those different body types and those different body shapes. The problem that we see with accessing some of those technologies is that people with disabilities are severely underrepresented in reaping those benefits, but both as producers and consumers as well. And so what we're trying to do with Remarkable is to see new startups that are creating technology that are inclusive of people with disabilities. We want to see startups and founders who design with people with disabilities, not for people with disabilities. And so we're going to introduce you to a couple of startups this morning. So I said I was going to talk for a very short period of time so that we could actually hear from our startup. So I'm going to introduce Aaron to you, and Aaron is from a startup called Exceptional. And they've just had some exceptional news in the last couple of weeks. Am I allowed to tell that? They just won a Google grant for $1 million. So I think that's worth a round of applause. And their founder actually met Prince Andrew like 2 days ago, and then met Princess Beatrice yesterday, like crazy. Like they're just they're going from strength to strength, not just because they're kind of celebrity status, but they're doing some really, really important work. So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron.
Celebrity status is often about timing. At the start of the year, I think we had about 6 weeks of funding. So, yeah, timing's a funny thing in a startup. I want to start with a question. How many CVs do candidates with autism send out, typically, before they come to Exceptional looking for a job? Any idea? Some of them keep spreadsheets. It's a shocking number, but it's the sad reality for people with autism. We heard from David before about people, employment and the unemployment rate. People with autism are 12 times more likely to be unemployed. And at the same time, every day, we have businesses tell us that they cannot find enough software testers, enough software engineers, enough data analysts. This is a very big problem. 125 million people globally have autism. I wonder how these things can coexist. We have, reportedly, a group that, on average, can have higher attention to detail, focus, mathematical ability to see patterns in data. And we have employers telling us every day that they cannot find enough talented people. And Microsoft touched on that earlier. A few weeks ago, I sat down with the CEO of a large recruitment company. And they shared that really the process for getting a job has not changed in decades. There's a written CV, a job description that is often just pro forma, lots of words, a phone interview, followed by a face-to-face interview. And at each step of the process, a job seeker, think about yourself for a second, and the last job that you got, you are often asked to articulate rather than demonstrate your skill. So there's a bias towards people that don't mind a microphone, that can sell themselves, but it's exclusive, it is not inclusive for people with autism, who sometimes in job interviews, because of their social anxiety, can appear disinterested, evasive. And our unconscious bias can mean that we discount people like that in the first 8 seconds of meeting them. Well, to solve this problem, we interview like this and we work like this. So Pete touched on before some of our recent exciting news, but to solve this problem, one of the things Exceptional is doing is building out technology that we are already using ourselves. So we place people in firms, we provide our own software testing services, and for us to understand the ability of candidates and get them to demonstrate their skills rather than ask them, tell me about a time sort of questions that we all get asked from time to time, we're building out some technology. That technology will use a series of assessments that can then map to specific skills. Things like pattern matching in data and attention to detail that we know can then translate into employment. But we're just getting started. It's really exciting that Google and Optus and Westpac have given us funding this year, and companies like Microsoft have got inclusive hiring programs, but we know we're really scratching the surface. A couple of weeks ago, our team was in Melbourne and we were doing a 4-day assessment program for a global technology firm. They deliberately wanted to hire some people with autism. On the first morning, Michael was asked, would you like to introduce yourself to the small group? He said no, and then didn't say anything basically for 3 days. His social anxiety was that high that even in a small group, he found it really difficult to speak. And to be honest, it was challenging for us to see how we could ever get past that unconscious bias and ever get Michael a job. On day 4 of the program, there was an exercise involving data analysis and SQL programming. Michael shone. He dominated that day. And I'm really pleased to say that he now has a job with that tech firm because finally he had the opportunity to demonstrate his skills rather than having to verbalise them. We are really just getting started. We know there are thousands of Michaels out there. It's our mission to find them inclusive, strengths-based employment. In the last fortnight, I've met a bus driver who has degrees in physics, mathematics and diploma in business and is fluent in 3 spoken languages who can't get a job. If you're a hiring manager or a technology leader in the room, I'd love to speak to you because we want to change the world one job at a time. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mel Fuller and I'm from a startup called Ability Made. I'm going to start by telling you a story about this little girl here, Eve. We met Eve about 2 years ago and her mum was actually seeking a better way to make a product called ankle-foot orthoses. And these are custom-made devices that help children with their mobility, their posture, and it supports them to walk as well. So Eve was born 3 years ago, and when she was born there was a lot of complications at birth, and she suffered a brain injury and has been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And for her to be able to reach developmental milestones and learn how to walk, her allied health team suggested that she use these ankle foot orthoses. So they went along to the appointment to meet with their orthotist. It's a bit of a mouthful, but they're the health professionals that traditionally make these products. And she had to undergo a 30-minute process of plaster casting her limbs. At the time, she was 2 years old, so you can imagine plaster casting a 2-year-old, 30 minutes each limb, how everyone in the room was feeling when she was screaming the house down. She still goes past that, that doorway in the building where the plaster casting happened, and she just avoids it. I met Eve's dad, and Joe said that that day was the second worst day of his life, the first being the day that Eve had complications at birth. So she undergoes the plaster casting, and then the orthotist proceeds to traditionally and manually manufacture the ankle foot orthoses, which is laborious and time-consuming. And because there is actually a global shortage of these people called orthotists, he knows that he won't be able to see her for such a long time, so he'll make her device 2 sizes bigger. So you can imagine you're a 2-year-old, you're trying to walk, but your shoe or your orthoses is 2 sizes bigger. That's a bit hard. So that's just one story, Eve's story. There is the World Health Organization estimates that there are 100 million people globally who need prosthetic or orthotic devices, and 1 in 10 are getting them. That could be due to a whole bunch of factors, but we think it's because there's a global shortage of these people who make them, and the way they make them is very manual. So we're on a mission, starting with ankle foot orthoses, to get kids and people with disability the equipment they need. So AbilityMate was born, and our solution is do away with the plaster casting. We don't need to plaster cast because everyone in their pocket has a 3D scanner on their phone. 3D scan the limb. We then have a team of CAD modelers, so 3D modelers, who then take a prescription and the scan of the limb and model it up. We then have a 3D model that can be 3D printed. So we've just launched our product, and right now we're 3D printing these devices, and we can turn them around in anywhere between 72 hours and 10 days, compared to the standard turnaround time of 4 weeks to 12 weeks. The orthotist has more time now to spend with their patient measuring outcomes, and less time in the factory. So this is all done via an online app that we've created with a whole community of users, of people who wear these devices and have worn these devices for a long time. But most importantly, the healthcare professionals who have been doing an excellent job, the best they can, but just can't keep up with demand and having to say no. So we equip them with a tablet and a 3D scanner, and they use that device to instantaneously take a capture of their patient, and then they upload their prescription to us, and then we have it 3D printed locally. I think the stats are that in 2016 there was 20,000 3D printers mapped in Australia, and the growth there we're looking at now today, there's about 45,000 3D printers in Australia. And so while not all of them can produce this device, many of them can. So while there is an underserved market of people who need these devices, there are many places we can make these devices. So we like to think that we make the process not just fast and less painful, but we make it fun. So we're at the moment trying to develop ways of personalising these devices where a patient can jump on an app and design up their own pattern, and we'll have it decorated for them. Right now we've got a team of CAD modelers that are sitting at their desk waiting for an order to come in, and they spend about 4 hours per order to make it. So we want to turn that knowledge of our CAD modelers into artificial intelligence. So I wouldn't be an entrepreneur standing here today without an ask. So if you know anyone who can help us automate and use artificial intelligence to make this fast and seamless, then yeah, hit me up. That's my details. Thanks for listening.
So Mel, I'm going to ask you to stay up here and I'm going to invite the others up. So just to wrap up that little section, so Remarkable supports these startups. We give them $35,000 in startup capital. We give them co-working space, masterclasses around developing their product as well as their business, and we support them by putting them also in front of investors as well. So these are just two of the examples. We've supported 18 companies so far. But we thought we'd just end off this part with a little bit of Q&A. So feel free to direct your questions. I think we've got time for a couple of minutes of questions. About 4 or 5, yep. So any questions directed at absolutely anyone? Ross, up the back. Has to be the furthest one away, right?
A really great range of presentations, so excellent work with what you've all achieved. This is more directed to Annie. Startups in Australia are, I guess, known for promoting good diversity and in inclusion, but their efforts in the digital apps, so like the websites, so the web apps, iOS apps, etc., have quite poor accessibility support. What can we do as a community to sort of breach that divide and sort of help out?
Great question, thanks Russ. And the simplest way of answering this is, I actually say this to pretty much every audience that I ever talk to when we talk about startups. We each have a unique set of wonderful things that we're brilliant at, each of us, whether we're a lawyer, a salesperson, a teacher, all of us have a unique set of skills, but it's incumbent upon all of us to pay those forward. So I would encourage every single one of you, there are so many different startup organizations, not just the Remarkable program, which obviously is very much core to sort of improving accessibility all around, but there are so many startups out there that actually don't even know where to start. And you folks do. So my plea to all of you is to get involved. There is a wonderful program here or entity here in Sydney called the Sydney Startup Hub. It's just on York Street next to Wynyard Station. There are 11 floors full of founders in there, and they all need help. Now, just like you folks are incredibly sort of passionate about inclusion and accessibility, we need for you to be active in these ecosystems so you can pass your knowledge on. So the answer is, it's down to each of us to get involved. So adopt a startup. Help them through how to be, this testing for accessibility and inclusion right from the get-go, so that they don't end up in 2 years' time when they've got some funding having to go build that back in. If we get them early enough and we get them thinking like this from the first few months of them building a company, they will have that knowledge for the rest of their careers and the rest of the other startups that they then go create afterwards. So go pay it forward, adopt a startup.
Hi, I've just got a question for Aaron. I'm interested to know, this is going to sound so bureaucratic, are you on any government panels?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, great one. We've recently got on the state government panel. They've all got acronyms and long names, but the one for providing technology services. So we have a team that does software testing. But I know it's part of the government's agenda to increase inclusive employment, and would love to chat to you about that after, but we're looking to do a pilot to bring people into the technology unit, areas like data analysis, software testing, and software engineering.
Thanks.
We have time for one more. Anyone?
think we're good.
I think I left my phone up there.
Okay, thank you very much to Annie, David, Pete, Mel and Aaron. It's actually really nice to see and really interesting to see innovation and such wonderful support from a company as dynamic as Microsoft supporting the remarkable program through this. It's great to see. So thank you very much. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Andrew Downie. Has anybody done any work with date pickers and the accessibility of date pickers over the years? Yeah, quite a few hands going up, so I think this is going to be a really interesting talk for all of us. So I'll hand over to Andrew Downie.
Just have a bit of a stretch while we do a bit of setting up. Won't take long. The Downie theory of cable says the two within a metre of each other will tangle. Has that come up on the screen yet? On the screen, good. That's a very good start. Come on. Almost there. Okay. Now we're running a bit late, so I'll whiz through this fairly quickly. I thought it was a fairly esoteric topic actually, but some people actually are working with date pickers, so it mightn't be quite as esoteric as I first thought. It arose out of a discussion I had with Russ some months ago, and coincidentally with some other people at the same time. So, which date picker format is best in terms of ease of implementation, validation checking, and when I talk about validation checking, I mean as the person is entering the information, not after it whizzes off to the server, because once it goes there, of course, you can do all sorts of stuff. Ease of use generally, and screen reader accessibility. 8 screen reader users helped me with that question, and I'll talk about them a bit later. So, simple edit fields, and I was going to show you this one, but in view of time, I'll skip it and I'll show you a similar one, but one that's a bit different. Okay, so simple edit fields, easy to write. Completion is easy for most people. Validation by way of restricting to numbers only, limiting the length of the input, and to some extent checking for a valid date. There's no calendar. What I mean by that, you can't tell that the 3rd is a Wednesday or a Thursday or whatever. Automatic edit fields. I got a bit fancy with this one. I thought it'd be nice if it would jump to the next field automatically. Essentially the same features as the standard edit fields, but it jumps automatically to the next field. That rewards accuracy, but it makes error correction more difficult. So if you type a number and you wanted to change it, it can get rather fiddly. Validations are the same as for standard ones, so I won't go into that. I didn't want you to do that. Just bear with me a second, I'll see if I can fix that. Good, I fixed it. So this is the automatic one.
Heading level 1 date picker with separate fields for day, month and year. Please fill out the form below. Use the real date. Please fill out the form below. Although you are asked for your date of birth, you do not have to. Use the real date.
And that was just because some people get a bit sensitive about their age.
Heading level 2 date of birth. Enter day as 2 digits, edit has autocomplete.
So I'll put in 12.
Enter month as 2 digits, edit has
autocomplete. And you see it jumps
autocomplete.
automatically to the
Blank.
next field. I'll put 03.
Enter year as 4 digits, edit has autocomplete.
I'll show you some
Blank.
validation checking.
Dialogue, you were not born in 1885. Close this message and return to the form button. But enter year as 4 digits, edit has auto.
So you see that's a modal dialogue that I wrote, which I rather like, and you'll see when I jump out of it, it takes me back into the edit field. So
Submit button. And the crowd cheered on 1203 1985.
Okay. Combo boxes. A bit more work required to write. Depending on implementation and the way I've done it, you can't put in an invalid date. You might put the wrong date, but you can't put a date in that doesn't exist. It can show the day of the week as well as the day. Selection can be fast for astute users, and I'll show you that in a minute. Others may find tedious, so if you don't know that you can just type in the number, if you're born on, say, the 30th of a month and you've got an arrow all the way down, that can get a bit slow. What number are we? Here we go.
Firefox. Unknown. From the following form, please select your birthday in 2019. Select year, combo box collapsed, use arrows.
So I'll just arrow down.
2018, 2019. Select month, combo box, use arrow keys or alphabetic keys collapsed.
So instead of using numbers here, I've used the alphabet. So if I wanted August, I can just type AU and it jumps.
Select month, August.
Straight to August.
Select day, combo box, use arrow keys or number keys collapsed.
And say I wanted the 30th, I can just type in 30.
30 Friday.
And it tells me that the 30th is on a Friday.
Submit button. Happy birthday for 30082019.
Okay. Tables. Visually very convenient. You can't select an invalid date. It may involve a lot of tabbing for keyboard users. So again, if your birthday is towards the end of the month, you really have to be able to tab all the way through. At best, slower for screen reader users.
Calendar table.
Not for you.
From the calendar below, select your birthday in 2019. Heading level 2 calendar for 2018 button unavailable. Button 2019. Current month, January 2009. February button.
Now, this, I didn't do this as well as I should have. I should have a next and a previous on these buttons. I did at one stage and they got a bit complicated and I took them out, and that caused quite a bit of confusion for screen reader users.
Current month, February. Current month, March 2000.
So say I want to go to July, I can just go through.
Current month, May. Current month, August 2009.
Oops, I went too far. Go back.
July 2018. July. Current month, July 2000.
Now we'll go to the table.
Calendar for month of January. Row 1, column 1, Sunday. Row 2.
Say I want the 17th of July.
Row 3, button 7. Row 4, button 14. Monday. Wednesday, column 4, button 17.
There I am. And
congratulations for Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2019.
What I used then was the table navigation mode provided by the screen reader. And I'll say a bit about that in a moment because, just because. HTML5 date picker. Very easy to set up. Invalid entry check is easy. You can either use numbers or arrows. Those allows rapid entry for wearer features. You can select, it seems to, I don't know where it starts and ends, whatever, I could put in the year 1000 and it seemed to know about it, and 3000, just quite amazing. It starts off on today's date. I'm going to show you, because of time, I'm using Google Chrome for this one. If I used Firefox, it wouldn't have a feature that I'm about to show you. Oh, you want to hear that, don't you?
Select the day of your birthday in 2019. Enter date. Spin button DD.
So say we put 15.
15. Month, enter date, spin button 0. 07. Year, enter date, spin button 0. 2019. Show date, pick a menu button, sub menu.
Now we have a button there, and this only works in Chrome.
Monday, the 15th of July, 2000.
And it tells you the day. In Firefox, it doesn't do that. It just gives you the date as numbers. But a bit more on that. So it's intuitive to use with suitable browsers, which are Firefox and Chrome. Only shows the weekday in Chrome, as I showed you. Features vary between browsers, which is a bit of a nuisance. I didn't use this when I got the screen reader users to look at it. If you use IE, it just shows you plain edit fields, and it doesn't work at all in Edge. David? So screen reader user feedback. So first of all, many thanks to the 8 people who volunteered their time to help me with this. They all had at least 15 years experience of screen reader use. There was a variety of screen readers, operating systems, so the following is anecdotal rather than rigorous. I spoke to them over the phone while they went through these pages that I just showed you. They gave me feedback as to what they were finding difficult and what they found easy. I could also hear their screen reader as they were working, which was convenient. There was a wide variation in skill levels. I mentioned this yesterday, and it's one of my bugbears. As for most people who fill out forms, or many people who fill out forms, the instructions, reading the instructions was optional. That is, people just didn't read them well sometimes and got themselves into a bit of a knot accordingly. They were all comfortable with the edit fields. Some liked the automatic advance. It confused others. There were 2 people using iPhones with VoiceOver, and they were so quick at flicking to the next field that they actually they beat my JavaScript and they had to go back. One of them found that pretty easy to do, just realised quickly what had happened. The other one found it a bit confusing. Combo boxes were generally liked, and tables were generally, well, disliked is probably a polite way of putting it. Most didn't know about table navigation, so what I did a while ago, most didn't know how to do that. One of the people I showed, or I explained the commands, and their comment was, "That's magic." Even those who did know how to use the table navigation didn't use it. They just went button by button by button by button. I suspect that, they were often very apprehensive, and I'm quite sure it was because of prior experience with websites generally and forms in particular, and I think they were expecting all sorts of demons to leap out at them. So they were, even people who I would regard as being quite confident were a bit hesitant in this circumstance. So closing comments. Combo boxes offer accessibility and easy to use. They're good for validation. Tables are liked by visual readers, but certainly not liked by most screen reader users. You might have noticed back there, at one stage, well, I think on most of the pages, I said enter day of month, and that threw people. If I just said enter day, they would have known, but trying to be a bit nicer to them, they're that confused. So, yeah, getting the wording right is really important. Most of these people learn to use their screen readers just by trial and error. Most of them hadn't read the manual that comes with it. And that's, I mean, it's a topic for another day, but it really does concern me that we have people who aren't getting the best out of their equipment because they haven't learned to use it properly. That's a negative note to finish on, but it might give people food for thought. Thanks very much. If there are questions while I'm switching this off, then yes.
Hi Andrew, it's Julie here. I've just recently been giving talks about making date pickers, and I chose the table, well, I chose a plain text field that accepts values from a table. So I think I'm going to have to do version 2. And I was wondering if you would be able to help me work on that.
Yeah, grab me afterwards. Yeah, happy to.
Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for your talk. Where I work, we've had complications with date pickers through user-centered design exercises with people in the community. A lot of people really like the calendar, which is great for sighted mouse users, but it's problematic for many others. We've had not much success in trying to find a fully accessible date pop-up calendar because, as you showed, it's dependent on the browser as to how accessible it is, and also dependent on the adaptive technology, whether it's which version of JAWS, different version of JAWS, different voiceover, NVDA, getting different results every time. So what we did, and what I'd really like your feedback on, whether you think this is acceptable, is we keep the date picker there for sighted mouse users, but we put code in to hide it to screen reader users and have a fully accessible edit field as an alternative with instruction as to the format of inputting the date with a clear label, so that when the focus goes past that, completely ignores the date picker for sighted mouse users. Do you think that's an acceptable design?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, as long as you're confident that it's picked up the screen reader and so forth. Yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. My own preference after playing with this stuff is I think I prefer combo boxes to the edit fields. I think it just gives you, it's less susceptible to error, and it does work very nicely. But certainly the edit fields are going to do the job. Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
G'day everyone. So I'm going to be talking about accessible inline error messages. I've got a different slide deck on here to here, and that one looks far more fun, by the way. It's talking about chatbots, so I might just do the one on here and just ignore that one, if that's okay. That's quite disconcerting. So the first question you're probably asking is, what are these things? So a quick run through for people who may not have had to deal with them in the past. So here's a quick example. And what we have here is a label saying age, and then we have a form control, and as you can see it's got a little red box around it to show that it's in some error state. And then we have our error message, and that says, in this case, error must be a valid age value. And you'll notice over at the left we have a little symbol with a apostrophe just to show that there is an error there. So the next question is, when should they occur? And generally speaking, they should only occur when the form's in an incorrect state. That means the user filled in something incorrectly. And they should either appear in one of two states. The first one is when the user directly after leaving that field. So if a user fills it in, as they leave the field, the error message can be injected. And the other one is that they wait till the form's attempted to be filled in, and on submit it's hijacked, and then all of the states are appearing then. And the purpose of them? Well, generally speaking, they should inform users that there's an error, hopefully, and they should help users fill it in, and hopefully that information should be contextual. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen this where error messages are really painfully unhelpful. They just say invalid or something like that. Hopefully they'll give detailed information, like if it's a phone number that's incorrect, it should say you have 8 digits instead of 10, etc. And in terms of appearance, they should be in close proximity to the form fields. I'm sure all of you have seen that where error messages are put all over the place, so generally I prefer them below or above, somewhere very close to them. And they should have include some sort of visual indicator. So in this case, and also there should be sort of colour, what did I say in screen? There should be, oh, it's gone. There should be something about colour. Oh, it's in a different order today. They should not use colour alone. So you should use something like an indicator like this that helps, even if colour's stripped out. So in this example, the version is in black and white, but you'll still see the icon actually helps you determine that it's an error message. But I want to talk mainly about this thing called programmatically associated. So in order to do that, a lot of people here are aware of it, but for those that aren't, I'm going to quickly talk through the screen reader's 2 modes, and they are read mode and forms mode. So in read mode, it allows users to navigate through the page and just read the page. But in this version of this mode, you can't actually interact with form controls. Now in modern browsers, you can switch between automatically, etc. But fundamentally, it's worth knowing about anyway. And the other mode is forms mode, and in this mode, it allows users to interact with form controls. And the most important things that you'll see in a second, that it's restricted to elements that accept focus. And so elements that can't be receive focus aren't announced to assist you technologies. And that gets to the crux of what we're talking about. So I'll give you a quick example. So here we have a piece of code, and we have label. In this case, the label has the word email, so it's an email form. And then we have an input, and it's got typable text, but that could be typical as email as well. And then we have, we've got for an ID, always. And then we have our error message. In this case, the error message is in a paragraph. So the question would be, would that be announced? And the answer is that this won't be announced to assist you technologies. And the question is why? Well, it's actually, there's 2 reasons why. Because by default, the paragraph cannot receive focus. But more importantly, that paragraph isn't programmatically associated with that input. So that means that it will never be announced to screen readers. So the aim, any aim when you're dealing with error messages, inline error message, is to make sure they're programmatically associated with form control. So that's our aim. And we're going to look at 4 different methods for doing this. So the first one is my favourite, and that's just to wrap the label. So in this case, the label just wraps around everything. And so here's our bit of code. We have a label at the top, and as you can see, it's wrapped around the entire input, around everything. Then inside it, we have a span with our label content in it. Now, the span's irrelevant. I use that for styling, but you could leave it just as text. We have our form control, and then we have our error message. And of course, we have a matching for an ID value still inside there because it still needs to be explicitly associated. And that is a very robust method. So if you look at this testing, you can see that it passes across the board. So on screen we have a chart with 3 different screen readers. We've got VoiceOver, NVDA and JAWS. And under each of those 3, there are 3 different browsers. So we have, for VoiceOver, Chrome, Safari and Opera. And then for NVDA and JAWS, we have Chrome, Firefox and Edge. So across all 9 tests, all pass. The second method is using the ARIA describe by. So a lot of you probably had this problem. You go and work in big corporations and they just can't wrap labels around them, either for technical reasons or they just don't like to do it. So there's sometimes you just can't do that where you wrap a label around the outside. So in those cases, ARIA describe by can be used to programmatically associate these error messages with the form controls. And so here's our second bit of text, of code. So we have a label at the top. And in this case, the label content is the phone number. And as you can see, the label's not wrapped around at this time. Then we have our input, and then we have our error message. We still have it for an ID to make sure they're programmatically associated. But the most important part is inside the input we have ARIA-describe by, and then we have a value of D1. So it's looking for an ID value so that it can be applied. And directly below in the span for the error, we have that D1. So now it'll read phone number and then the error message because they're programmatically associated. So again, this method's very well supported. For some reason, it fails in IE Edge on JAWS, but there is a way to get around that, and if we get time afterwards, I'll talk through that. The third method is ARIA error message. This is a newly introduced one. It was introduced in ARIA 1.1 in December last year, so it's about 11 months old now. And just like ARIA describe by, this one can be programmatically associated with the form control. So what we have here is our bit of code again. So we've got a label. In this case, it's saying mobile number. And then we have the input. We have an error message. We have our for and ID matching, as always. But then inside the input, we have ARIA-error message. And it's got a value of M1. And it's looking again for an ID value. So this is very similar to ARIA describe by. The only difference is it's actually more semantic, and it's hard to describe why, but an ARIA describe by is looking for any description. What we're saying here is we're actually now looking specifically for an error message, but it theoretically works the same way as the ARIA describe by. Now I say theoretically because it has no support at all. And in fact, the chart is horrifyingly bad. It's got no support across the board. But because it's quite new, we've got to give it some time. So I think, I'm hopeful that this will become a really useful option because I believe it is actually more semantic than using things like ARIA label by and describe by in this particular case. And the last method I'm going to talk about is ARIA label by, and I've tucked it at the end because I'm not a great fan of it, and I'll explain why in a second. So just like ARIA describe by and even ARIA error message, it can use to programmatically associate error messages and form controls. But there's a warning that comes with it, and that is that the ARIA label by will wipe, or, well, let me say that again. The label will be ignored and the ARIA label by content will then be read out. So if you had something like address for the label and then error, there's something wrong with the address, if you put an ARIA label by there, it will only read out the error message and won't read out the address. So it would actually fail. Now there's a way around that. So we can work around it, and I'll show you here. So here's our bit of code, and we have our label, we have our input, and we have our error message below. We have a matching for an ID, always. But here's the first part of it. What we need to do is we actually need to put the ARIA label by with 2 values inside it. So the first one is pointing back up to the label, and the second one is pointing down to the error message. So we need to do that, and what that'll do now is it won't ignore the address because it'll be read out as part of the ARIA label by attribute. And what we'll have now is address and then the error message. Now it's critical that you put those values in the right order inside the ARIA label by, if you want it to be read out in the correct order. So as you can see, it's a lot more work to get this one to work properly. You have to point up and down. And it's kind of worrying that it does wipe the label. And in fact, I've seen some businesses recommend this as an option, but not tell developers that they need to point up to the label as well. So it's slightly worrying. Now, this method is well supported across the board, but I'm not a great fan of it, apart from all that extra work. The main reason why I don't like it is we have a label there associated with a form control. So if it says address, that is the label. If you have an error message, that's helping to describe the label. It's not another label. So to me, ARIA describe by or ARIA error message is a much better semantically than ARIA label by, particularly as it's actually saying, I'm going to wipe your label and put my own one in there. So that's a good reason not to use it, unless you guys have a different reason, in which case we can duke it out in the break. I want to talk about two other things before we wrap up. And the first one is using ARIA invalid. So this attribute should be used with all form controls. And what it does is it tells assistive technologies the state of that input. It can tell it whether it's in an invalid or a valid state. So initially it should be set to false. So in this example we have ARIA-invalid false, which means that either the user hasn't filled it in yet or they filled it in correctly and there's no invalid state. But if a user were to put invalid data in there, it should be dynamically switched to true. And then you get something like ARIA-invalid true. So as I said, that just helps assistive technology to tell them the state of that input. And then the last thing to be aware of is using ARIA Live with these. So the ARIA Live attribute allows you to inform assistive technologies about updates to a live region. So what we're talking about here is if you're injecting content into a region of the page, you can tell screen readers, etc., that something's changed in there. And this is really helpful in our case because we're going to be injecting error messages into a little span there. So what you can do is something like this. This bit of code has ARIA Live off in this example. I'll talk through those options. But you could inject an error message into there. And the attribute should be present regardless. And then it's just telling screen readers, be aware of this space, something's going to be injected in here, or could be injected in here. And there are three different values you can use: off, polite, or assertive. And I'll quickly whip through them. So off, with that one, what should happen is it shouldn't be announced to the screen reader at all unless they're actually focusing on the element. A lot of people get confused and I think off means it's actually turned off, but it just means that it's not yelling at you, if you know what I mean. And the second one is polite, and what that means is screen readers or assistive technology should be notified at the next graceful opportunity. So if you're reading through a chunk of text, it should wait and then announce that to the screen reader user. And the third one is ARIA Live assertive, and as you can imagine, that's just yelling at you. And it should yell over the top. It doesn't actually yell, but you know what I mean. So that'll announce over the top of everything. Now, a lot of you probably are already aware of this, but this one should be avoided when associated with error messages on inputs. And the question is why? So I'll open that up to you. Why would we not use assertive in this case? Anyone have an idea? What's that? Oh, that's the answer. For those who couldn't hear, the user might not hear something else. So the error message, I've actually seen this happen. The error message could be announced over the top of something else and drown it out. So I've actually seen examples on a banking application where the developer thought they were doing the right thing, and most of this comes from the place of wanting to do the right thing. So they put on assertive because they wanted to tell the user as soon as they left the field, hey, there's an error in this field. But what ended up happening was that as soon as they left the field, they tabbed to the next field, and instead of saying phone number, all they got was, hey, there's an error in this thing above. So it actually was drowning out other information. So I prefer to use the off and just let the user experience it rather than just sort of shouting at them all the time. The other one just to be aware of is to avoid roll equals alert. The roll equals alert, I'm just going to go back. The roll equals alert has the same intrinsic value as ARIA Live assertive. In fact, I've seen this a lot. People actually put roll equals alert and an ARIA Live attribute together. And in fact, they're totally irrelevant. In fact, what I've seen even more strangely is people who use roll equals alert and then ARIA Live polite. And roll equals alert has much more power. So not only is it doubling up, it's actually will override it. But in our case, again, I've seen developers put roll equals alert on an injected error message, and that will operate exactly the same as ARIA Live assertive and just shout at them over the top of everything else. So try and keep it light and use off. So here are some examples. We've got, to tie it all together, we've got our wrap version right round, and we've got our ARIA Live invalid true in that when it comes to that state, and we've got that ARIA Live off sitting there. And the same would happen with ARIA described by. We've got ARIA invalid true and ARIA Live off. And the same for the error message one. We have ARIA Live true and ARIA Live off. That's when they're in the state where the error message is present. So what's all this about? The most important thing is to programmatically associate our error messages. And the simple method is just to use the label. I still staggered that it's not used. 10, 15 years ago, it was just a very common practice, and for some reason it's gone out. But it is just a quick win across the board, and it just makes things very easy. But if you can't do that, ARIA label by, sorry, let's take that back. ARIA describe by is a very good option, and it works really well. And generally speaking, it's a good idea to use ARIA invalid and ARIA live as long as you use the ARIA live off. And the most important thing is just test. Test with a range of devices, test with a range of combinations of screen readers, etc. And most importantly, test with real users. As Andrew was saying, you're going to get a variety of different opinions, but at least you've got some information there. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Russ. I wouldn't go too far. I'm sure you're going to get some great questions out of that. Thanks for a really interesting presentation, as you always do. We've got time for a few questions. So who has a question for Russ on the presentation?
Russ, I've got one simple question for you. Why aren't you using ARIA label when the person... Hey? Oh, yeah. Hello! Why aren't you using ARIA label when the person, there's no visual label there and you're preferring ARIA described by over the top?
Let me go back. So we weren't using ARIA label. I wasn't using ARIA label, I was using ARIA label by in that fourth example. Is that the one you're referring to?
No, I'm more for referring why aren't you referring to ARIA label? Because ARIA label, I know you just plug in the actual label for the actual form field.
Yeah, you can use, there is now a sufficiency technique where you can use ARIA label instead of using a label. So there are cases, depending on who you speak to, I know work with people like Gianna, she's violently opposed to it, but there are examples where you can use ARIA label instead of label. But generally speaking, they should be used in very specific cases. An example could be like a search form at the top of the site where it's very clear that the purpose is there without needing a visible label. And then you could use ARIA label. And that is applied directly to the input element, and you don't need the label itself. But generally speaking, the problem with that is that any sighted user doesn't get that label. So generally speaking, I would always suggest that we use a label with the input and attach them together with for an ID, and then programmatically associate the error message in one of these other ways. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
He's just stretching, I think.
Actual question.
When you said that it can be validated on user input or on when the field, the whole form is actually submitted, do you have any suggestions about how, when the form is submitted, if there are multiple errors, how that's presented to the user and how they can navigate to those errors without having to traverse the entire form?
Yes. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of people that can answer this, but from my perspective, there's a range of things that could happen. One of the funniest things I saw a while ago on a big university site is, this is what not to do, is that you fill in the form, there's all these errors, and then you hit submit and the focus stays there. So if you were a blind user sitting there, you would just hit submit and you're like, what the hell is happening? For a sighted user, the form is glowing red with errors, but they have no idea. And in fact, the common thought is, something's failed to deliver. So the first thing would be to shift focus. So where should we shift focus? That's up to you.
To the first error.
Where?
The first error.
Okay, what if there are multiple errors? There's many ways to do it. I would generally, if there's more than one error, I would shift it to the top of the form and present them with a little error message which explains that there are errors on the page, and then I would give them a list of those errors and ideally make that a list that's linkable so they get a range of them. But the most important thing is to shift focus somewhere. Now, if there's only one error, there's arguments about this, and there are probably people more passionate and skilled about me in the room. The two schools of thought: always send them to the top of the form and give them a message, or send them, if there's only one, you could send them just to that input. But if there's more than one, I'm not a fan of sending to the first one and then letting them discover the second. I prefer to send them to the top and say, hey, there are 3 or 4 errors in here, you've got to deal with them all. Here they all are, and here's how you can get to them. Does that help answer the question? Anyone have a different... I'm hoping someone will get violently opposed here. Anyone with differing opinions? You're all so boring. I think that's it. Thanks, everyone. Oh, come on. No clapping. I need a drink.
My question is, with the submit button, right? Is it good practice to just sort of disable that button rather than allow the user to hit the submit button and then see all the errors, or just?
That's a good question, and I'm not a fan of disabling things generally, and a lot of the problem with that is that for a sighted user, that probably has context. Does that make sense? Like, if you're a sighted user and you go and fill in the field and it's disabled, you've got visual clues there. You're going, okay, I can see that I can't submit it, and you can, whip your eyes back up and see it. But imagine from a screen reader perspective, you're just travelling through that form and then you come to a disable button. Does that make sense? Like, there's no context around why that's been disabled. So I'm not a fan. Again, love to hear other people, but I've actually sat and watched people do it and they just said, oh, I can't submit. And then they have to go and discover why. So I'm not a fan of disabling it. And there may be edge case where it's really valuable, but just on that case, I don't think it's a good idea. Oh, I think we've got a differing opinion. Yes! She's about to say, I completely disagree.
Not quite, but is it worth having a disabled submit button with context? So explaining why it's disabled with links to the fields which have errors?
Sorry, say that again? I might have missed it.
Because I have a really strong opinion about disabled buttons.
Hang on, can we Sorry, did we get the question? Because I didn't quite get the question. And then, yes, please answer it.
It's feeding off the last question about having a disabled submit button.
Yep.
Is it worth having a disabled submit button with contextual help, explaining that there are errors in the form and with links to those errors?
I probably wouldn't.
Not worth it?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I wouldn't do that. In fact, the problem with disabled buttons is that generally they don't get focus. So you're assuming what ends up happening for the screen reader user is they just end up going through that form 100 times, and depending how those error messages are being portrayed, they may not get the error message. Because it's probably in focus view, which means they're only hearing the labels. They don't know what they've done wrong. And they just end up rotating through that form. It's a really frustrating experience.
A lot of this comes out, I completely agree, a lot of this comes out is just watching users perform them. That frustrating thing, where you want to jump across and click a button and say, no, no, but watching the pain of users. And it's only when you're so used to, all of us are used to sighted view, and when you watch someone who's got none of that context, oh my God, you can see immediately why it's a problem. Anyway, I'm sure that's got to be it.
No, I think it's just like in general good practice to allow the user whatever they want to do, like not restricting the user to click submit, and sometimes users just missing something like on a very complex form and stuff. So I think it's like never a good idea to disable anything. So it's just like giving the option for a user to do everything they like and then providing contextual information about it.
I love that. Can I just say on that note, I went through a bit of a brain insanity one night, and I was looking at forms and I said, I've got a wonderful idea. When a user fills in the form incorrectly, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to set ARIA-Live assertive on there so it shouts at them, and I'm going to put the focus back in the field. So I'm going to force it back in the field. So I took away all control for the users, and we shout at them and then send them back there. So imagine the experience for a user. Like, it only took me 10 minutes and I thought, what the hell am I doing? But there are times when we completely forget, and admittedly that was only 10 minutes of insanity. It was probably 2 or 3 in the morning, but yeah, completely agree. Don't take any of that away from the users.
Oh, just a very quick comment on that. With the stuff that I showed, with the error message, I had a modal dialogue to report the error, and then they clicked and that took them back to the field, which I personally quite like. It tells you what's gone wrong and then drops you back to where you should be. So, I mean, with the submit button, if something's gone wrong, then you should be getting an alert that it's gone wrong. So there should be an ARIA Live. ARIA Live equals polite is my favourite ARIA role.
That's a good point. Actually, back on the other question, if you send users up to the top of the field and there's an input box there, an error message box, that should have ARIA Live attached to it, because it should be sitting there waiting as a box saying this is a live region, and when the error message is injected at the top of the form, the screen readers are already aware of that. So yeah, completely agree. That's got to be it.
All right, thanks again, Russ. And you beat me to it. I was about to say another round of applause. Thank you very much for your contributions. We're going to move to morning tea, so if you want to make your way down onto the stage and out the back to the green room. We'll be back in half an hour, and Ross Mullen is going to kick off with a presentation about chatbots. So let's make it on time, half an hour. See you then.